Okay, we're back for part two of the big premiere. And I just thought of something. Even though you're listening to my book, you might want a copy of your own. And I would sign it for you if you bought it from me personally. And you can find that and the premiere photo and my art and a lot of things on my Etsy site. So that's Jackie Naaman Jones. That's my name on, if you type that in and you spell it correctly, which is easy to find, then there you go. I have a lot of things. I'm an artist too. I think you know that. Okay, where are we? Yes. Finally, the big night arrived. All Hal's hard work schmoozing everyone who was anyone in El Paso had paid off. The premiere of Manos, Hands of Fate at the historic Capri Theater in downtown El Paso was playing to an 800-seat house packed to the balcony on November 15th, 1966. 1 month and 1 day since John Reynolds' suicide. Searchlights scanned the skies in front of the theater. Cast and crew walked the red carpet past a smiling crowd into the theater after stepping from a 1955 black Cadillac limousine. Fans pushed forward begging for autographs. Naturally, Hal had choreographed this simulation of Hollywood glitz in typical Hal fashion. That is, on the cheap. He borrowed the big advertising searchlights from a friend who owned a local car dealership. And these were placed strategically on the sidewalk in front of the theater, set to scan the open skies and causing many to wonder what great event was taking place downtown. The limo was funded from the remaining budget at a probable discount, with the owner assured of future business transporting VIPs that would surely flock to the area. With only one limo available to transport the entire cast and crew, and the need to make our arrival a production in itself, Hal directed us all to gather a block over and wait in the dark alley behind the Cortez Hotel, as though we were backstage in the wings waiting for our big entrance. The limo would pull up, a group or family unit would get in and be driven around the block to the red carpet that began at the theater entrance and rolled out to the sidewalk. We would step out to the flash of cameras, a small crowd of elegantly dressed attendees, well-wishers, and autograph seekers bobbing in and out, waving paper and pencils. The autograph hounds were fake, too. To portray fans, Hal had hired several destitute street kids not much older than me, who by day sold chiclets, gum, or washed windshields in traffic. Considering it was 1966 and we were less than 2 miles from the Mexican border, it's most certain these kids didn't speak English, had never seen a film, or even been inside a theater. And I'm pretty sure the boys had no idea who we were supposed to be. William Bryan Jennings came that evening with his family, except for his older son, Brian, who was away at college. His wife, Polly, teenage daughter, Mary Jean, and his youngest son, Benton, then 11, stepped from the limo dressed to the nines, moving past the young autograph hounds as they thrust pencils and pads of paper to anyone exiting the limo. As the Jennings family walked the red carpet, Bill was congratulated heartily by friends and peers and greeted by El Paso dignitaries, the mayor and Sheriff Mike Sullivan, who presented him with a real El Paso sheriff badge. The women who played the wives all appeared in white or light pink evening gowns and gloves and sat in a group, possibly for safety and protection. Everyone had invited friends and family to share in this exciting life event. Diane Marie, looking gorgeous in her cream gown and her mother's mink stole, had arrived with her family. She and her brother sat next to us, while her parents sat right behind her, looking proud of their daughter, the movie star. As for myself, I was busy soaking it all up and trying not to miss anything. I wanted to remember, not even the fleeting thought of, doesn't anyone notice it's the same car and driver going around the block, picking up people and dropping them off? Could spoil this evening for me. I was in a movie with my dad, who looked quite dapper in a rented tuxedo, his hair combed back with Brill cream, a little dabble, do ya? And his mustache carefully trimmed. It was truly wondrous and spectacular to when so young. I acted the part of a perfect little lady as we made our way inside and found our seats. The lights went down and the audience settled into a quiet expectation. First, the trailers of coming attractions, a cartoon, and a 20-minute true-life nature adventure set in the Antarctic. And then, Manos, the Hands of Fate, for the very first time on a big screen anywhere. It was all a beautiful illusion until the movie began. Up to this point, we had only seen a few unedited scenes at Hal's house on his home projector, so none of us really knew what to expect. 8 minutes from the start of the film, with nothing happening on the screen but driving and jazz music, it was clear to the audience and to us that our collective world had already begun to show cracks. I mostly recall sitting with rapt attention, waiting to see myself on the big screen, and finally there I was. I was fascinated. And then the mouth on the screen opened, and some strange voice came out. My body went numb. My face got hot, and I burst into tears. No one had bothered to tell the little kid that the voices had been dubbed. It was humiliating and devastating, and I was completely unaware of the extreme discomfort the rest of my family and cast members were experiencing. Sitting between my mother and her brother Diane realized as quickly as the rest of us that this was not what we had hoped for, and instantly came down with a severe case of giggles. She just couldn't stop. Her mother, who was sitting with her dad directly behind her, started poking her in the back while whispering furiously, "Stop laughing, this isn't funny." Diane, however, thought it was hilarious, and knew she, at least, would be leaving town as soon as she got her VW van back on the road, putting the entire debacle behind her forever. There were others who weren't enjoying themselves as much as Diane. Bob Guidry was a public figure at Channel 4 as a sportscaster and news director, and he knew he wouldn't escape this unscathed. He'd been feeling pretty nervous all day. Since he had been there with Hal for the all-night initial rough editing session at the news station, he knew the limits to the magic of the lab that Hal had been going on about all summer. In retrospect, he knew there was much more that could have made it better, but he also knew they'd done their best with what they had. He also knew they had no control over what happened in the lab after the film left his hands. Bob and his wife Pat had arrived in the back alley to join the others and wait their turn for the limo ride before walking the gauntlet into the theater. They found seats off on the side aisle, not too close and not too far back, and not too obvious in case things didn't go well. Their greatest fears were realized the moment the giggles, groans, and catcalls began. Everything melded together as they sunk lower in their seats, looking for an opportunity to sneak into the outside fresh air and beyond the revolving searchlights that still heralded the great event. Dad later described his viewpoint of these moments. We were sitting about 5th row center, a spot Dad had chosen so we could see the whole screen. In spite of his feelings of apprehension, he looked around and saw enough friends and supporters among the audience to slightly ease his nerves. How bad could it be, really? And then the movie began. Driving. So much driving. He became aware of the whispers around him. The dialogue on screen began. The whispers turned to giggles and incredulous snorts. He began to focus only on the screen, entertaining a fantasy of escape. He visualized his family, the three of us, metamorphosing into snakes. He would, as Patriarch Reptile, slide beneath the seats and pull Mom and me from the theater and disappear into the dark. Sadly, we were trapped and forced to either stay or draw even more attention by getting up to leave. When the end finally flashed across the screen, we left as quickly as possible, making our way back to our car with hopes it could all be put behind us sooner rather than later. Bill Jennings and his wife were so embarrassed that they got up and left the theater even before the lights came up. Benton Jennings, 11 at the time, remembers it this way. A lot of the premiere is a blur, but I remember my father being presented an honorary El Paso County Sheriff badge, which I still have, before the film, and then wondering why we were all getting up and rushing out of the theater at the end before the lights came up. And yet, in spite of everything, Bob Guidry had this to say in a 1966 article by Richard Brandt in Mimosa magazine. You have to give Hal credit. If you have any idea, even in Hollywood, how difficult it is, let alone to get a film made, but to get it finished, get it through post-production, and then get it distributed, well, what he did was something of a miracle. Even so, Bob and Bernie escaped, leaving friends and family to fend for themselves while they went to a bar for a premature after-party drink or two. The official cast party was held at the house of Bernie's mother, where Bob, Bernie, Hal, and a few other friends and family showed up. Sherry Proctor, one of the master's wives, doesn't remember the party and thinks the wives weren't even invited. I know my family didn't go, and the Jennings most certainly skipped it. Bill Jennings was heard to say, "After all, we weren't trying for an Academy Award, but it's doubtful anyone realized it would be quite this bad." Was the party an event of jesting, drinking to oblivion, commiseration? No one is left to say, but I'm fairly certain that everyone involved, with the possible exception of Hal, believed this to be the end of Manos, the Hands of Fate. The next day, the El Paso Herald printed the first critical review of Manos in a Betty Pierce article that generously states, "For an amateur production, the color came out very well." She helpfully went on to say, "However, and perhaps by scrapping the soundtrack and running it with subtitles or dubbing in Esperanto, it could be promoted as a foreign art film of some sort or other." Manos was obviously so bad that reviewers were unwilling to say what they truly thought. Many of them would have known and respected some of the cast, and Manos was just too easy a target among the small and closely knit community of supporters of the arts. Joan Quorum, the El Paso critic who had and would continue to write so many glowing articles about the talent of Tom Naiman, remained graciously silent. Just as the original movie poster suggested, the film truly was horrifying, but in a much different way than Hal Warren intended. And the horrified and humiliated participants were anxious to close this chapter of each of their lives forever. But forever was not to be. I love that chapter. I forgot how much I love it. Chapter 10, the film that wouldn't die. And that'll be tomorrow. That looks like, I'm not sure if that's going to be a 1 or 2-parter. But we're getting there. chapter 10, and it goes to, what is it, 14 chapters? 13 chapters, and then the epilogue by Tom Neiman, my dad, the master himself. Thank you for being with me so far. If you skipped any episodes, just go back up in my YouTube channel. My daughter-in-law has beautifully put everything in order under Growing Up with Manos playlist. So thanks for being here, and I'll see you next time.